Good afternoon and welcome to a very special episode of The Angry Astronaut. Joining me today, I have Andy Crocker from the Dynetics Corporation. For those of you familiar with my channel, you may remember that Kathy Lorini was usually the person who joined me from Dynetics. She is retiring, but Andy's going to be a very interesting person to talk to because he heads up space strategy and manages the Human Landing System project. So this is going to be a very, very in-depth conversation, I believe. So, Mr. Crocker, thank you very much, first of all, for joining us.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm excited about it.
Excellent. So a lot of my viewers are very familiar with ALPACA, at least as how ALPACA used to be. But we're going to get started instead with a little differently than I've done some of my previous interviews with you folks. And if these are things you can't answer, feel free to simply say so. Lunar Starship is, as we both know, the sole selected HLS system for Artemis, and it is expected to be landing on the surface of the moon in 2025. Now, given the recent conversation that Elon Musk had with his followers and with a large crowd of people out there at Boca Chica, we're at 2022 right now. Starship has yet to go to orbit. And if it doesn't get the approval from the FAA without further environmental studies and that sort of thing, Elon himself admitted that it could delay the entire orbital process until sometime in 2023. In your opinion, is a 2025 human landing even feasible?
I don't know, Jordan. We've been following the SpaceX progress like anybody, just like anybody in the space business. We certainly wish SpaceX the best, and certainly hope that they're able to make progress quickly. I think, unfortunately, they got a late start. NASA's contract to them was awarded later than what had been planned, and so that's slowed things down. And I'm sure some of the things that you referred to have also slowed things down. So it's going to be tough for anybody, even SpaceX, that tends to move fast to make that kind of date. But we're hoping the best for them.
In your opinion, would you say that the HLS issue is the biggest challenge facing Artemis? I mean, everybody talks about SLS and the immense, delays that have been involved. Dynetics, as of course you know, is heavily involved in SLS. And yet, not too many people are talking about the fact that HLS got started really late in the game. Would you say that HLS is one of the biggest challenges that Artemis has to face if they're going to try to make it by 2025?
I think that's a fair statement. I think HLS, just by the nature of being a landing system, landing on the moon, it's an incredibly complex technical problem. Even though we've come along so much farther than we were 60 years ago with Apollo, and many commercial companies do have the capability to pull this off, I think. It's still a technical challenge. There's still a lot of things that have to be matured, and a lot of development that has to be completed. And so 2025, probably was a challenging date even several years ago. Today, with where we are and the delays that have happened, it's probably about as aggressive as you could hope to be. And like I said, it's going to be a difficult challenge for anybody. But I think, so much of it has been driven by the budget, and the fact that NASA hasn't received the budget that it has asked for the last several years for HLS has really kept the program from moving along as quickly as we all have wanted. So that's really the major slowdown, and I think, it's probably fair to say that HLS is the long pole today.
Okay. So, I mean, that being the case, we have one provider that's been, a commonly disputed thing, something that's, been debated a great deal is the fact that only one HLS provider was chosen as opposed to multiple, potential providers for commercial crew, that sort of thing. So if this one HLS provider doesn't come through, if, Lunar Starship doesn't make it by 2025, or indeed even faces some serious technical challenges, then what's going to happen? We have the sustainable segment of the contract. So we have other landers in the mix, but, they're obviously a lot further behind. Let's say Lunar Starship doesn't come through. How rapidly could Alpaca, get the job done? Let's assume NASA throws all the money at you that you need. Let's say a miracle happens and, and that were to occur. When do you think Alpaca could make that happen? And also, what are the major challenges that you're facing right now?
Yeah. Well, let me tackle several pieces of those one at a time.
Sure.
First of all, I think it's probably the case that even those listeners to your show are unaware that the contract that SpaceX has, that NASA awarded to SpaceX, is currently just for a single one-off demonstration. And the sustainable part of the contract that NASA had put in place has never been exercised. So at this point, the work that is going on towards a sustainable lander, and to be clear, sustainable lander means one that could support a continued human presence on the moon, could support many different types of landings, cargo, crew, delivery of a habitat or cargo or a rover or other things. That kind of a landing system is not what was originally solicited by NASA, and is not what theoretically what SpaceX is on contract to do. The contract that Dynetics has and 4 other contractor teams have that we're currently working are early steps along the way towards that. So, to your point, if as we progress towards a sustainable system, whatever happens after this one-off demo that NASA has awarded to SpaceX, a significant amount more money needs to be allocated to that. And to date, Congress hasn't decided to do it. NASA has continued to push for it, but to date that just hasn't happened. So NASA has had to slowly progress, move things along bit by bit in that direction. And I think, right now with the outlook for an FY22 budget, if one ever gets officially approved, and FY23, the outlook isn't a lot better. Congress has definitely not stepped up to support HLS in a way that's necessary to enable two providers in a full manner. Right now, SpaceX is the only provider that's supported in a full way, and everybody else is at a very, very low level. Where I think it would have to go is that Congress would have to acknowledge that it needs to provide significantly more funding in order for 2 providers to be enabled, and it would communicate to NASA that it not only provides those funds, but it intends for those funds to be used for at least a second provider. With where we are today, early 22, given that any kind of a development like this, even though we've been making progress for the last couple of years, it's normally, even on a fast schedule, 4, 5, 6 year development. And so anything before 2027 or 2028 for the next landing would be difficult, unless there's just an incredible amount of money put into from outside sources. But even then, it's just kind of the phrase that's used sometimes. 9 women can't have a baby in 1 month. You can only do so many things to develop a system in a given month or in a given year. So you run into a problem where no matter how much money is thrown at it, you're not going to move any faster. So it's we've kind of gotten to the point where with a single down select to SpaceX and the amount of money that's being provided to the other contractors, it's just not going to enable another system to happen very quickly if SpaceX has delays or has issues.
So, in other words, I mean, and just so we're clear, or that you're clear, and my viewers certainly know that I am an advocate for Starship. I certainly look upon a rapid, reusable vessel capable of carrying enormous amounts of payload as being, a wonderful idea. But at the same time, if LEO refueling doesn't come through, and it's going to involve a great deal of LEO refueling for Lunar Starship to make its journey to the moon and then come back to LEO in order to be reused. All the other challenges that it faces, life support being another one. Obviously, I'm for a much bigger fairing than Crew Dragon, that sort of thing. Facing all of these challenges. So what you're saying is, if Lunar Starship can't deliver that by 2025, or indeed, by 2026, 2027, the earliest anybody else is going to be able to do this is 2027 or so. Is that your opinion?
That's my opinion. I can't speak for the other contractor teams. They may have other thoughts based on their approaches and their development timelines. But given where I think we are and the amount of money that we're going to have, even if it were to get aggressive, I think it would be difficult to press much faster than that. We'll see what NASA's preferences are. If they release a more detailed plan for sustainable landing, they may have a more aggressive timeline than that and have ideas for how to achieve it. But that's my outlook.
Yeah, and I would tend to agree with you, especially with the other contractors. I mean, as you know, the other contractors are essentially the national team all split up into individual teams making their own landers now. So, and forgive me or correct me if I'm wrong here, but I would say that, people like Blue Origin and such, they're kind of starting over, right? Because the national team combined design is pretty much DOA, right? They're all doing their own separate designs now.
Well, I'll say that our impression was that the approach that the national team took for the previous opportunity was really focused on trying to achieve 2024. The way that the team was put together and the way that the different elements of the landing system were put together was really trying to short circuit, I guess, the development process and inject some elements that were theoretically further along and may not require as much additional development or modification to make an early human landing possible. But I think even that team admitted that for the longer term, there would be significant changes. My guess is that what's happened since NASA has focused on SpaceX for the near-term landing and a broader set of competitors for the longer term, that they've, I guess, more readily or more quickly moved to the next option, which is how to get there and have a sustainable system, and whether or not they stick together as a team or have separate offerings when it really comes to the point of making bids to NASA. We'll see. But I do think necessarily there'll be changes just by the nature of the different approach to the sustainable system.
And feel free to say no comment on this particular thing, but the People's Republic of China released a statement about their own moon landing and moon base program, stating that the way that they're going about it is far simpler, far more efficient, and just a better plan in general by doing a moon direct kind of approach. No lunar gateway, no separate landing system to the orbiter, that sort of thing, kind of consolidating everything into a single mission, as opposed to the multi-stage process that we're seeing here. Do you have a comment as to whether, because they flat out said that their way of doing it is superior. What answer would you have to that?
Well, I'll say that there are many approaches that can be taken to achieve a lunar landing. Not to say that it's easy in any case, but there are many different approaches that can be taken. I think most of us who keep up with space history remember that the Apollo team debated for many years on what approach to take, and ended up with lunar orbit rendezvous as the preferred option. It took a long time to get to that, and I guess in retrospect we could say that Earth orbit rendezvous would have worked too. It just would have taken a different set of elements and a different approach. NASA early on decided that it wanted to have a gateway in near rectilinear halo orbit in order to not just support lunar landings, but also provide a jumping off point for deeper space missions. And so there's a lot going on in the decision process that led to the approach that the U.S. has. It's hard to argue, given the set of objectives that NASA used, with the approach that it has taken. If you're going to go moon direct, you need a different launch vehicle, and you need other things that are different than what you would use if you have an NRHO rendezvous with a space station. So it's really hard to say which is best. And I think China, maybe they made the best decision for their situation and the things they have to develop to make it happen quickly. Remember back in the original space race, we were trying to do things to move as quickly as possible as well. And some of the decisions we made back then probably would have been different if we had had a more leisurely pace to get to the moon. So a lot of different factors play into it. And, maybe for China, that's the best answer. For us, I think NASA has a different set of things they're factoring in.
All right, we'll move on now to the Alpaca itself after 17 minutes of interview here. I certainly want to give you an opportunity to, we've talked about Alpaca several times on my channel, and of course I've interviewed Kathy twice about it, but Alpaca has gone through some changes. I was wondering if you could address those changes, what Alpaca is looking like these days, and specifically, how have you addressed the problems that NASA said that they identified? Number one, the mass issues that existed with the previous design, and number two, the refueling complexities, refueling Alpaca in cislunar space as opposed to LEO. Have you addressed those issues?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to talk about it. So, number one, the approach to trying to achieve a human landing in 2024 or as quickly as possible really drove all the contractor teams. We talked about the national team. It drove our team to make choices that were strictly with the idea of trying to get there as quickly as possible. And so we made choices that were not mass efficient. They were more schedule efficient. And as we once we realized that we wouldn't have an opportunity to try to do the quick one-off demo, we refocused on the longer term, and really that allowed us to have a more mass optimized approach, which is really what we knew we would get to all along. But after the one-off demo, we would have transitioned on to something more like this. It just allowed us to do it more quickly. So we knew from the very beginning, and in fact, we had talked to NASA even before we proposed for the original demo, that we had a plan for addressing the mass and bringing the mass to closure, even for the initial lander demo. But as we refocused on the long-term demo, it allowed us to, I think, do it in a more efficient way, a more integrated way across the system. So if you were to step back and, from a 50,000 foot level, look at the Alpaca and the decent ascent element today, you may not see any obvious differences, but I'll talk through a couple of key ones. One is, avionics and software tend to be major drivers of development schedule. And with the very, very quick schedule we had, we were taking a lot of things off the shelf. Now that we can focus on the long term and really try to develop the right solution, we've got a much more customized much more streamlined avionics approach, and along with that, a much more streamlined software approach. So those are, better from a cost perspective, better from a mass perspective, and overall just better from an integration perspective. The propulsion system is more streamlined. We've got 4 engines instead of 8, and those 4 engines are slightly larger in order to allow us to maintain our engine out capability all the way to the surface for abort situations. But makes the propulsion system a little more efficient. The rest of the system, kind of goes along with it. We've been able to tighten things up in the structure and tighten things up in the thermal control system in order to match up with the improvements we've made, and in the crew module even, the major quote unquote payload on the crewed missions. The crew module, we've made lots of little tweaks here and there to save mass and to improve efficiency. So overall, we've saved thousands of kilograms of mass, but mostly by just doing things the way that you need to do it for a traditional step-by-step development program. And so right now we're in a comfortable place with mass margin and mass growth allowance accounted for, and we're just continuing to chip away at the mass to try to get to the best overall solution to meet NASA's requirements. With respect to the in-space propellant transfer, that's something that we're all going to have to tackle. As you said, SpaceX has an approach to do it in LEO. Our approach is to do it in lunar orbit. We think that it's doable, but it certainly requires more technology development. And we're currently funded right now by NASA to do some full-scale ground tests of a fast transfer of cryopropellants into a full-scale tank. We will be doing that by the end of the year, and that follows some testing that we've done just over the last year and a half that really shows that there's a lot of promise in it. So not to say it's easy, certainly one of the top risks, maybe still our top risk, but it's something that we have to tackle, whether it's us or any of the competitors. It has to be tackled, and frankly, it's an enabler for the future of space exploration. So why not tackle it now and make it possible to help us have a better landing system?
That's fascinating stuff. Thank you for that detailed answer. Some quick specifics. Vulcan Centaur still your vehicle of choice?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. And we're still looking at what all the options are. Obviously, cost is a major factor, and so we're trying to make sure that that's going to give us the best cost going forward. But that is our baseline, yes.
How many flights of Vulcan Centaur will it require to deploy the lander or deploy the ship in at the gateway?
Yeah, so we have for crew missions and cargo missions, it may be different, but let's just use a basic initial crew mission to the South Pole, 2 crew members, kind of one of the first missions that would follow the initial demo. Most likely it would be 1 launch of the decent ascent element itself, which is the ALPACA with the crew module, and then that would be accompanied by 4 launches of propellant, and the propellant then would be used to fill up the tanks, and the tanks would continue down to the surface. There are missions that are more challenging that will require a 5th propellant tanker, but we have shown that we can get to just about all of the moon, maybe not every single spot on the moon with our current design, but most of the spots of interest with 5 tankers and not having to redesign the system to accommodate that. So it makes for a somewhat complex concept of operations, but we think that 4 or 5 tankers is doable and is within the realm of reasonableness to go after.
So you're going to need 4 flights of the Vulcan Centaur in order to make 1 journey to the moon. Is that correct?
Well, we'll need, for the simplest missions, we'll need 1 flight of the decent ascent element plus 4 flights of propellant. So that would be 5 total. The good news is that because we have a single stage lander, we intend to come back to NRHO after the mission and be ready for the next mission. So then we would just need 4 flights of propellant and consumables to be delivered for the next mission. We wouldn't have to send another lander.
What if what if Starship turns out to be a viable a viable system, maybe not human rated, but as a tanker itself? What happens if Starship can bring 100 tons of propellant or oxidizer plus propellant out to Alpaca? How does that change the equation for you?
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. The fact that they're doing their refueling in Leo makes it a little bit different from ours, but that doesn't mean it's incompatible. And so, yeah, the scenario that you're referring to is something we've talked about, and it may be that the two systems have a crossover point at some point down in the future where we could work together. We've talked about it, and there may be opportunities for us to talk between our competing teams about how we might work together. But certainly we believe, and I think the other contractor teams also believe, that fueling in Leo and in cislunar space are both going to be necessary. Eventually we'll have propellant depots, and those will be real enablers for all kinds of deep space missions that we all want to do.
Gotcha. Well, I definitely appreciate that. Another question about life support. This is something that kind of came up during the whole Starship rollout and everything. The Alpaca, what sort of endurance does its life support system have?
Yeah, right now we are hoping that, as I said, we want to be reusable. So we're hoping that we can have between 3 and 5 missions out of a single vehicle. We've designed it so that the consumables for Eclipse are refillable, and the tankers that we take out to deliver propellant will also take these consumable fluids, as well as when we send spacesuits and other logistics to support crewed missions out to Gateway. There'll also be consumable tanks of consumables that can get put back into the ecosystem to refurbish those and have them ready for the next flight. So right now we're looking at between 3 and 5 missions per lander. That may change over time as we see what the real life limiters are, and obviously the longer we could go, the better. But we've got to prove those systems out.
Well, this has all been most intriguing. Thank you. Are there any other changes you'd like to tell me about? We're about to hit the 30-minute time frame point. These interviews tend to be pretty ruthless in their time scale. Sorry about that. Anything else you'd like to mention about Alpaca, the changes that have been made? What makes this the best system?
Well, I think we still believe strongly in many of the characteristics that we had from the beginning. Such as the fact that the cargo is so close to the surface when you land. Not only is it convenient for crew members for conducting EVAs, but it's also convenient for cargo missions. One of the things that we've looked at in our current contract with NASA that's really interesting is the ability to dock with other surface systems, such as a rover, so that crew we could have essentially shirt sleeve transfer from a landing system to a rover and then over to a habitat. And that could really improve the safety and reliability of the systems, improve dust mitigation, improve the life of the suits. There are all kinds of advantages to being able to do a shirt sleeve transfer on the surface. So we've really touted that, and we know NASA's looking at that itself as to see if that would be an overall Artemis feasible approach to the Artemis system. But we just see there being real benefits to that, and that's just one of many that we think are possible with the design we have.
Well, once again, thrilled as always to talk to Dynetics and to hear more about Alpaca. Clearly, NASA feels that there's something interesting about this given the funding that they continue to provide to you folks. So I wish you all of the best, and thanks so much for joining the show today.
Thank you, Jordan. Really, really appreciate the opportunity, and thanks for sharing this message out with your fans.
And one more thing, guys. After we stopped recording, I asked Mr. Crocker exactly how much in the way of propellant will be needed in order to make this journey, and the answer is 40 tons. So do the math, guys. 100 tons on a tanker starship, perhaps 2 complete journeys to the moon on an Alpaca. It is possible, and Mr. Crocker said that it was, at least in theory. Who knows what sort of collaborations might be possible in the future. So until these things become a reality, I urge all of you to stay angry about space.